Wouldn't it be really cool to like sit down and watch like a historical fiction of the Adirondacks? That's the kind of thing over a morning coffee that I'm like, oh, what would I put into this movie? Like, how would it happen? I keep coming back to this idea that's like a bad ripoff of Back to the Future 3. Like, you get into a train and then you're like transported back in time.
From NCPR, this is Northwards. People, ideas, and conversations from and about Northern New York, Vermont, and beyond. I'm Mitch Tyke.
Support for the Northwards podcast comes from St. Lawrence University, where a strong liberal arts tradition with real-world applications equips students to solve 21st century challenges. stlawu.edu.
To say the history of the North Country is filled with colorful characters is maybe an understatement. The people, explorers, loggers, entrepreneurs, and others, who came here over the last couple hundred years had many tales to tell. Some of them were tall tales. Some of them were even taller. They're characters who have captured the imagination of Doug Smith for a long time. Smith is an artist and a software engineer who lives in Vermont, and for the last several months, he's connected his talents in art and technology with his love for Adirondack lore to breathe new life into some mythical North Country names. Smith is the creator of an Instagram feed called ADK Legends, his stunningly beautiful and often funny depictions of Adirondack history makers and the tales they told. It's definitely worth a look while you're listening right now. Doug Smith joins us on the line from Vermont. Welcome to Northwards.
Thanks for having me, Mitch. Just excited to be here.
So who are these people that inhabit this parallel universe, and where did they come from?
These people are generally folks that I think are legendary from the history of the Adirondacks, and it's kind of my imagination and portrayal of these people, places, and things from a place and people that I truly do love.
Do these little vignettes, the snippets of would-be Adirondack history, do they come to you individually, or do you have some bigger picture in your head that is coming out piece by piece?
You know what? There's a little of both. Certainly, I find moments of inspiration that I draw from, but I certainly have certain pieces of Adirondack history that have highly spoken to me. And I'm also kind of letting some of these stories develop as they may. So, one of my absolute favorites from going way, way back is Adirondack French Louis. When I really was first kind of exposed to the Adirondacks, some of my friends were rather excited about French Louis, and it got me to read the book. And of course, my buddies would use all of the sweet French Louis quotes like "Bah, the holy fish" and everything like that. And always just thought he was awesome. And it would be the kind of things when I didn't really want to be at my desk and I'd rather be out fishing in the Adirondacks. And I'm like, man, French Louis just had it all figured out. And he's just like such a cool, colorful kind of character that was loved by people, and he just lived a really kind of liberated life. He'd come into town and he'd go on what he called a spree and blow all of his trapping money and cash. So yes, French Louis is kind of one of my favorites and sort of a storyline that I'm developing. And yeah, I spend a good amount of time kind of piling through whatever history I can get my hands on, and then trying to find these just interesting tidbits and kind of exploring them and seeing what developed from there. Another thing that I'm kind of finding through my audience is that some people really connect with some of the things I've been able to portray. And I've had a few kind of members of my audience get in touch with me and want to share about the history that they're connected to. And it's really been some of the most satisfying part of the project. So, two in particular, a woman who is associated with the Perkins family of Perkins Clearing, which we're also good friends of French Louis, shared with me some material from their family history, and it's just very interesting. And then also some descendants of Mitchell Sabattis, who was a renowned guide, also shared with me some of their family history. And it's just given me like an extra depth to explore. And it's just been really awesome to see people kind of inspired about their own histories, and as in turn sparked quite a bit of interest for me.
Do you feel like you're creating the history that you wish were true? I mean, there are obviously grains of truth to what you're drawing, but you take enormous liberties with them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And for sure, I embrace the fact that what I'm creating is, in many ways, an idealized history. In fact, one book that I've been rather inspired by is by Adirondack Murray, who was a preacher who wrote a book in the mid to late 1800s about the Adirondacks. And I guess the book is controversial in its own way, but it's also rather idealized. And I really connected with it in a lot of ways because I could see that Adirondack Murray loved the Adirondacks. And he also had a little bit of a flair for making things sometimes maybe cooler than they were. Um, Maybe more from a sort of realistic side of it is some of the works by Seneca Ray Stoddard, a photographer, but also an author. I've really drawn a lot of inspiration from his work as well.
The ultimate irony here is that we're talking to you and you're in Vermont. You're not in the Adirondacks. What is your connection to the real Adirondacks?
All right. So my connection to the real Adirondacks is I studied in Utica, New York at Munson Williams Proctor Institute. And while I was there, I was introduced to the Adirondack Park and immediately fell in love with the park. And I have been going back and back and back again.
If we were to take a look at the era that you most frequently chronicle, it feels like it's the Gilded Age.
Absolutely. Yes. I definitely feel like there's a lot of some of my like favorite things to depict that come out of this, yeah, the Gilded Age, from what I would roughly guess to be like 1870 to like 1900-ish, where you've got the great camps are happening, the like vacation boom is happening where people are traveling up there. And certainly there's something kind of interesting that I feel like happens, that people are kind of centralized together in places, more so than after the advent of the automobile, where I feel like the history starts to become a little bit more dispersed. Not that it's any less interesting, it's just that it's different. But yeah, I find myself coming back to the 1880s, 1890s quite a bit.
I was looking at a lot of the posts, and I feel like there's kind of, not your posts specifically, but that era has kind of this maybe misguided innocence about it.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's certainly not always the ultimately best things happening. I mean, one kind of travesty that I think of is in one of the writings of Nessmuk, he talks about how he's going fishing. It's in the St. Regis canoe area somewhere, and what the guides had decided to do was to go and dump paint over where there was a spring underwater in order to get those fish to get out of that cold water and come up to where they could fish for them. And as a fisherman, I was just like, oh man, that is just such a tragedy. We know so much more now.
How do you do the art for these pieces?
So this is all digital art. All of it is original, and I do use a lot of artificial intelligence generative tools for this art. I have a number of different workflows that I use, So I'll kind of come up with a concept and take the bits and pieces of the history that I know, and I will start generating ideas. And I mean, in generative AI art, there are kind of two basic ways to go about it. One of which is from text to image, and one of which is called image to image. So for a text to image, you could say something like a drawing of an apple. And these tools will do the best with what the training data that they have to represent a drawing of an apple. So you can start in that way. Or, for example, I can actually draw an apple and then show this to my tools. And I may also input text as well, and then go from that to the next possible piece. And absolutely part of the inspiration for this project is to kind of level up my ability to use these kind of tools. So I do have a heavy reliance on them. I also use a number of other kind of quote unquote traditional digital art tools. So, like Photoshop or 3D modeling tools. I am a software engineer by trade. And so I am also exploring a lot of the kind of deeper technology of these tools. One particular kind of thing that I have been working on is what is called quote unquote training, where I am taking these artificial intelligence generative tools and then I'm training them on particular concepts that they don't know. So there's a number of things that we would consider like super iconic for the Adirondacks that just aren't in the training data for these tools. So something like an apple, absolutely in there. There's these tools have been trained on tons of different apples and fruits and everything else. But a pack basket, no. A lean-to, no. So if you were to go and try one of these tools and put in a lean-to, there's a chance that the tool has seen a lean-to before. However, it probably associates it with something that is more generically like a cabin. And you're not going to get exactly an Adirondack lean-to, which every person listening to this show is going to know a lean-to if they have seen them. So what I do is I collect a number of images of a pack basket or a lean-to or the concept that I want to train. And I kind of slice and dice this data set. I'll associate kind of captions and words along with it. And then I will input these into computer programs, which are still very much developing. So you need a little bit of software development acumen to use them. And I will have a computer that is specialized that uses what's called a GPU, a graphics processing unit, in order to do kind of the like intense mathematics that is needed behind it. And I will let that run and it will train on it over time. Similar to how a person learns, but dissimilar for how a person learns. There's kind of a like sweet spot of learning. So I'll say, all right, we're going to learn pack baskets for 36 hours. And then at certain epochs, points in time, I will capture a snapshot of what's been learned. And then I will plot it out visually. So I'll get a grid of pack baskets and I'll kind of look through and I'll be like, that's the sweet spot at 18 hours or whatever it may be. At some point, they can become overtrained and then they just make everything a pack basket, right? So you need some kind of flexibility there.
Do you think of yourself as an artist?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, an artist who just uses like different tools at his disposal than an artist would have in the Gilded Age.
Yeah, absolutely. In the Gilded Age, it might have taken something a little bit differently. However, I do think of this as just another tool that you would use for digital art, just like you might use Photoshop, or even actually to bring it back to the Gilded Age, like Seneca Ray Stoddard was using a really revolutionary tool at the time that not everybody considered to be art, which was the photographic camera. It took him a lot of specialized knowledge and tools in order to be able to create that imagery that we know and love today. I do think that just like any other kind of art form, there's sort of a gradient of how much you could consider it art. You know, if you just scribble with a crayon, is that art? You can certainly just scribble with generative AI art tools. So I think that a lot of it has to do with what level you're taking the tool to. How much of that are you really creating as your own? It does make us ask some important questions, because I can just be like, give me a picture of an apple, and I get it. However, I think that it's a little bit different when you're really trying to create like a narrative and a story, and there are like a number of layers as part of it.
Well, and it has to be something to have these characters in your mind, these people that you've read about or seen or what have you, and the idea that you're putting them into these scenes and telling the software to do your bidding, and then they're breathed into life in front of you.
It is extremely satisfying when it's working. It can be very frustrating when it's not. However, I have to say that it really just does kind of scratch an itch for me. As a kid, when we had our first computer in the house, one of the first things I wanted to do with it was to draw. And I thought that it was going to make my drawing like 1,000 times better. But this would have been in the year 1988. So you're using DOS, and surprise, it did not make my drawing 1,000 times better. So to have tools like this where it really can kind of make a multiplier to your ability is really satisfying and interesting to do. It's a lot of fun.
You birthed this into the Instagram world just a few months ago with, I gather, not any particular fanfare, and it's kind of found this audience. Do you have hopes for where it may go? Is this a feed you're going to keep up? Is it a book someday? A graphic novel?
Yeah. Mitch, that's an awesome question. I've been thinking really hard about what is the next phase of this project. For now, certainly, I expect to keep it up in its current form. It's been a really great motivator to continue to master these kind of tools, and gives me like a real application that I can put some of my like software development skills towards a kind of artistic outlet. Has just been great. But yeah, I kind of wonder where it could go next. I certainly daydream about, wouldn't this be awesome as a movie? Like, wouldn't it be really cool to like sit down and watch like a historical fiction of the Adirondacks? That's the kind of thing over a morning coffee that I'm like, oh, what would I put into this movie? Like, how would it happen? I keep coming back to this idea that's like a bad ripoff of Back to the Future 3, like you get into a train and then you're like transported back in time. I'm like, yeah, that would just be awesome. So that's one thing that I think about. The idea of maybe, yeah, like a coffee table book or a graphic novel seems like it could be interesting as well. But for now, I'm definitely happy just kind of exploring the storylines that I've got and seeing where these take me.
Doug Smith, I'm honored to have gotten a chat with you, and keep up the great work.
Thank you so much, Mitch. I am honored to be on the show, and happy to share with everyone. So thank you very much.
Doug Smith is a software engineer and artist from Bolton, Vermont. He is the creator of the Instagram feed ADK Legends. You can see a sample and find a link to the feed at ncpr.org/northwards. That wraps up another edition of Northwards. I'm Mitch Tyke, and I hope you enjoyed our interview. If you haven't subscribed yet, I hope you'll do that right now and get new episodes delivered to you every Friday through Spotify, Apple, Amazon, Google, or wherever you get your podcasts. And sign up for the weekly Northwards column and newsletter while you're at it. Learn more about all of these things at ncpr.org/northwards. And don't forget, you and other listeners are the people that make this podcast and everything else at NCPR possible. Please keep it up. Support what we do with a contribution at ncpr.org/give. Thanks again for listening.
Northwards is an NCPR podcast production. The program is written, recorded, and edited by Mitch Dyke, with digital production supervision by me, Ethan Shanty. Music by the Wickmore Jazz Trio of Plattsburgh. To support this show and find more podcasts, visit ncpr.org. This is NCPR, North Country Public Radio.